Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of a Timeout with Tony. On today's show, I just want to do a quick timeout and go over a topic that I think some of us may be confused with or maybe getting frustrated with, and that is the difference between having resources and being resourceful. I know myself at times I struggle with this topic, so I wanted, just God has been put this word in my heart, and I wanted to just share with you, a different perspective on how to look at both what it means to have resources versus what it means to be resourceful. So, and to start off this broadcast, I want to give you the definition first and foremost, and we'll go further into other examples. But I always like to start off with the definition of what I'm talking about. So, the definition I looked up into the dictionary. The definition of resources means a stock or supply of money, materials, staff, and other assets that can be drawn on by a person or organization in order to function effectively. Let me read that again. Resources means a stock or supply of money, materials, staff, and other assets that can be drawn on by a person or organization in order to function effectively. Now, let me give you the definition of resourceful. Being resourceful is the ability to find and use available resources to solve problems and achieve goals. It means you have the ability to overcome problems or to make do with what is available to create a solution. So, as I look at those words, again, there's a definition between resources and a definition between being resourceful. And I know, like some of you, like myself, I struggle at times differentiating between the two. There are some great examples in the Bible of what I'm going to share here, being resourceful versus resourceful, having resources versus being resourceful. One of the stories, and there are many, but I'm just, in the essence of time, I'm just going to share two examples with you. One of them can be found in 2 Kings 4, and it's the story of Elisha and the widow. And in this story, the woman's husband had just passed away, and she was worried because his creditors were coming to take her sons away as slaves to repay his debt. Elijah asked her a simple question. When she brought this problem to him, she was, sitting there in despair, and he asked her a simple question. What do you have in the house? And listen to her response. She said, nothing except a small jar of olive oil. See, God had already given her something. She just couldn't see it as being enough. And then I want to go to another story found in Matthew 14. You may be familiar with this. This is the story of when Jesus feeds the multitudes, or you've heard it described or titled as Jesus feeds the 5,000. And in this story, he used 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish to feed well over 5,000 men, women, and children as they were following him. And the disciples were worried about not having enough food to feed all these people. See, I like to just use both of those. Those are just 2 simple illustrations of people who needed something, didn't realize they had enough because they were looking at what they had as not being enough. They were small. They had resources, but they didn't believe those resources were enough to meet the needs of what they had to happen at that point in time. Let's go back to the woman with the oil. As you may know about the story, may or may not be familiar with the story, when she said, I have nothing except a small jar of olive oil, Elisha gave her a specific instruction. The man of God gave her specific instruction. He asked her to go about the village and collect as many jars as she possibly could. And in that collecting of all those jars, she was going to pour the olive oil that she had. Remember, she said, I had a small jar of olive oil. He asked her to pour that oil into those jars and then go sell that oil to help pay her debts. She did as the man of God instructed her to do. And not only did she have enough to pay her debt, she had more to live off of. So again, she thought in her perspective, all I had was a small jar of oil. not enough to do what I need to do, she couldn't see that she already had her prayers answered because she was looking at just the natural manifestation of having a small jar of oil. In the story of Matthew and Jesus feeding the 5,000, again, the disciples were worried. They had all these people who would come out to see Jesus and listen to him. And they knew that these people were hungry, and they didn't believe they have anything to feed these people or enough. And here we go. Jesus takes this small amount of food and he blesses it enough to feed well over 5,000 men, women, and children. Now, what I want to point out is that in both stories, nothing happened by chance. Nothing happened by luck or circumstance. See, I believe these incidents were ordained and designed to happen. And these individuals, as I shared with you, they were given divine instructions and they listened. Jesus gave the disciples some simple instructions, they listened. Elisha gave the woman a simple instruction and she listened. They were obedient. Secondly, in both stories, it illustrates the importance of perspective. As I shared already, in both cases, the woman and the disciples didn't believe they had enough resources to meet the need. That's because they were looking at their resources and problems through, again, natural eyes, which many of us tend to do. We see our resources, we don't realize that they don't realize that they're enough because we see them in their natural state, natural form, and they don't look like much. Have you ever been there? See, we're convinced they're small and they're meager and they don't belong. They don't have, they're small and meager and they're not enough to get the job done. The problem is that many of us, including myself, we tend to focus on our temporary circumstances that we can't see what's on the horizon. So we look at the problem and we magnify the problem so much that we can't see the answer beyond the problem. We adopt a woe is me mentality, and that keeps us focused on the problem and not the God of faith who will supply all of our needs. Another key item in the stories I shared, I want to point out that I think people often ignore or overlook is that in both the story of Elisha and the widow and Jesus feeding the multitude, there's one simple fact that I think people overlook. Neither Elisha or Jesus brought the items with them. They didn't produce them. They were already present. Elisha did not bring the olive oil. Jesus did not bring the fish and the bread. They were already present. They were already in the presence of the people who needed to have a need met. But again, they couldn't see it. See, it's not enough to have the resources unless you know how to use them. I believe the blessing and answer to prayer often manifests when we become resourceful. That's where I think God shows up. It's when we become resourceful. That's where his presence resides, and that's how he does the supernatural. We have a tendency, we send up all these prayers. We say, Lord, can you please help me? Please send me this. Please provide for me. I need this. I need that. And I imagine sometimes God, who sits high and looks low, is sitting there shaking his head. And he's probably saying, what are you talking about? I've given you gifts and talents and provisions. They're already there. The answer to your prayer is already there, son. The answer to your prayer is already there, daughter. You need to change your perspective. Open your eyes, see what's around you. Take inventory of all the things that are within your grasp. Your answers are right there. If only you would tap into them, you can have the life that you desire. There are, again, a lot of stories in the Bible. There are passages I want to share with you, again, that speaks to the works of our hand. In the Bible, it says God will bless the works of our hand. There are a number of passages in there that speak to that. Again, take an inventory of what's around you and what's in you already to answer your prayer. In Psalms 90:17 says, let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Proverbs 22:29 says, do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. Proverbs 16:3 tells us to commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. There are so many more. Psalms 128:2, you shall eat the fruit of the labor of your hands. You shall be blessed, and it shall be well with you. See, having resources doesn't always necessarily mean you have things. Sometimes having resources means you have gifts and talents already within you. The question is, how do you tap into all that to be an answer or to receive the answer of the prayer that you sent up? We send up all these prayers all the time, and sometimes we forget, or we don't take inventory of what's already around us, what's already within your circle, what's at your fingertips. And don't despise small things. As I just gave you two examples, small things can have big blessings. They can have a big impact. So I'm going to challenge you as you pray for God to reveal things to you. I'm going to ask that next time you pray for resources, ask God to reveal the resources that are already within your grasp. Have him show you and give you inventory of things that are already around you, or more importantly, or just as important, things that are within you. Then ask him to help you to be resourceful. Don't just pray for resources. Yes, there are times you do need resources. Let me just be clear on that. But there are times where I think we're asking God for resources, and they're already there. We just need to be resourceful, because that, to me, I believe is where God's blessings of the supernatural will be, when we are resourceful with what we have. And let me read the definition again of resourceful in case you forgot. Resourceful means is the ability to find and use available. Did you hear that? Available resources to solve problems and achieve goals. It's the ability to overcome problems or to make do with what is available to create a solution. Remember, with the widow, she already had the olive oil. Elijah didn't produce it. He didn't bring it with him. It was already there. It was already available. When Jesus fed the multitudes, the fish and the bread were already there. He didn't bring them. He blessed them. Yes, he did. But they were already there. He didn't bring them with him. He didn't hocus pocus, magic, nothing. They were already there. I would also encourage you that, if you're going through a challenge or crisis right now and your situation looks hopeless, pray to God that he will send someone into your life, an anointed person, whether it's a pastor, minister, family member, friend, or colleague, to help you discover and maybe see the bounty of resources that are currently around you. Sometimes we need others to help us see those things. Again, like I said in the examples, Elijah helped the woman see she already had resources. When it came to feeding the multitude, Jesus helped the disciples see that they had more than enough to feed the people who were there. This will help you sometimes to have somebody that you trust and respect to come into your life. Maybe they can point out things that you may be overlooking, and maybe they can point you in the right direction of what resources are currently available to you. So we must remember that we got to keep our focus on God, which is easier said than done, but it's an essential step to help us overcome and defeat problems. Sometimes the answer to your prayers is just a matter of changing your perspective from asking for resources to seeking ways to being resourceful. So I'm going to encourage you and close by saying, have faith. When you're praying to God, have faith. Listen for divine instructions. That was paramount in both stories I shared with you, and the other stories in the Bible that you can find, where people listened to divine instructions and their prayers were answered. Open your ears, open your eyes, open your hearts to receive the answers that you are seeking from God. And lastly, thank him for the blessings. Again, the blessings don't always look attractive. They don't always look like they're enough. But when God gets involved, they are more than enough. When his supernatural hits the natural, it becomes more than you can ever dream of. So I hope that this quick timeout helped you. I don't know who I'm speaking to today. Someone right now needed to hear this message today as I am sharing it. Some of you are struggling right now with that decision. Do I look for resources Or is it a matter of me being resourceful with what I already have around me, what's already available to me to answer the prayer that I'm sending up to God? Sit down, take a moment, take inventory. Know the difference between the two, resources versus being resourceful. I hope this message has helped you. If you are being encouraged by the podcast, feel free to contact me at timeout@tonyrprice.com. I love hearing and reading your emails, sharing how much this is helping you and how you are sharing this with members of your family, members of your colleagues, your friends and teammates. That's good to know. It encouraged me to keep going. And I'm glad I can be a service to you and those who you share this information with. You can also find me on the various social media platforms. You want to reach out to me in that way as well. So until our next time out, be safe, give thanks, and look for opportunities to encourage and serve others. Now it's time to get back in the game. God bless.